The rain was drumming against the windshield of Jack Miller's Peterbilt, creating a hypnotic pattern of droplets and reflections from passing headlights. Another endless night on Interstate 80, somewhere between Cheyenne and Omaha. The CB radio crackled with scattered conversations of other truckers, but he kept it low, just enough to stay alert during these early morning hours. The local radio station cut through the monotony. ... And in related news, the series of dog disappearances continues across 3 states. Police are investigating what appears to be an organized ring of thieves targeting purebred dogs, with particular focus on former show champions. Jack switched to another station, letting classic rock fill the cabin. After 20 years on the road, he'd learned to focus only on what mattered: the route, the schedule, and keeping his rig running smooth. The Ruby's truck stop sign emerged from the darkness, its neon glow reflecting off the wet asphalt. Jack hadn't planned to stop. His logbook showed another 3 hours before mandatory rest. But something about the old-fashioned diner's warm lights made him ease off the accelerator. "Just coffee," he muttered to himself, maneuvering the truck into the nearly empty lot. Most of the overnight spots were vacant, unusual for this time of year. The diner's bell chimed as he pushed open the door, bringing with it the familiar scent of coffee and apple pie. A waitress was wiping down the counter, while 2 truckers huddled over their phones at a corner booth. Everything seemed normal, except for one thing: a large black dog lying near the entrance, partially hidden in the shadows. The dog raised its head as Jack passed by. Something in those eyes made the veteran trucker pause. They weren't the eyes of a regular stray. They held a kind of intelligence and something else: fear. "Whose dog is that?" Jack asked the waitress as she poured his coffee. "Showed up last night," she shrugged, topping off his cup. "Thought it belonged to one of the drivers, but nobody's claimed him. Won't eat much either, which is strange. Strays usually wolf down whatever they can get." Jack looked closer at the dog. In the fluorescent light, he could now see what he'd missed before: fresh scars beneath the black fur, and one ear partially torn. This was no stray. It was a Belgian Malinois, a breed he recognized from his army days. His phone buzzed. The shipping company needed him in Chicago by morning. Some high-priority cargo couldn't wait. Jack sighed and finished his coffee in one long gulp. As he stood up, the dog's head snapped toward the door. The sound of a heavy diesel engine idling in the parking lot made the animal tense, its eyes suddenly wide with unmistakable terror. Jack paused. 20 years of trucking had taught him to trust his instincts, and right now they were screaming danger. The engine sound in the parking lot was familiar. Diesel van, not a truck. "Hey, beautiful," he called softly to the dog, pulling out his half-eaten sandwich. "Hungry?" The dog didn't react to the food, but its gaze remained fixed on Jack. Suddenly, heavy footsteps sounded outside, and the animal pressed itself against the floor, trying to become invisible. The bell above the door chimed again. 2 men in work jackets entered the diner. Nothing special, regular drivers, except for their 2 watchful eyes as they scanned the room. "Seen anything unusual here?" one of them asked the waitress. "Maybe a dog?" "Nah," the woman yawned, not even glancing toward the entrance. "Just the usual customers." Jack slowly stood up, dropping a couple of bills on the counter. His heart skipped a beat when he saw one of the men instinctively touch the side of his jacket, where people usually carry a weapon. "Damn," he thought. "What have you gotten yourself into, pup?" He walked past the dog, deliberately ignoring its presence, and went outside. The rain had intensified. In the lot, besides his Peterbilt, there were 2 other trucks and a dark van with no identifying marks. Jack climbed into the cabin and started the engine. His mind was racing. 20 years ago in Iraq, he'd seen dogs like this, elite military animals capable of detecting explosives and apprehending criminals. Such a dog was worth tens of thousands of dollars, and if it had been stolen, well, hell, Jack sighed, and before getting into the cabin, looked back at the diner. The dog was still there, pressed against the wall. Their eyes met. "Gonna regret this," he muttered, and holding the door open, patted the cabin steps. "Come on, soldier, quick!" The dog seemed to have been waiting for just this. With one powerful leap, it cleared the distance to the first step, then the second, and in a moment was sitting in the passenger seat, as if it had been doing this all its life. "At least your training's solid," Jack chuckled, closing the door and starting the engine. "Looks like we're heading to Chicago together." As the truck pulled onto the highway, he noticed in the rearview mirror that the van was starting to move. "Easy there, buddy." Jack glanced quickly at his new passenger. "Looks like we've got a tail." The dark van maintained its distance but didn't fall behind. The rain was getting heavier, turning the road into a shining mirror. Fortunately, the highway was almost empty. Few dared to drive in such weather at 3 in the morning. The dog wasn't whining or fidgeting. It sat straight, watching the road attentively, as if understanding the situation. Definitely service dog, Jack thought. A regular pup would be panicking by now. The CB radio suddenly came alive. "All drivers on I-80 west of Omaha. Warning just came in about a landslide at mile marker 147. Detour recommended through." Jack checked the navigator. They were about 15 miles from the mentioned section, and 2 turns away was a construction zone, the only place where they could take the detour. The van suddenly accelerated, getting dangerously close. In the headlights, Jack noticed its license plates were covered in mud. Deliberately or accidentally, it was impossible to read them. "Hold on, boy." Jack shifted gears and pressed the gas. 40 tons of cargo limited maneuverability, but gave an advantage on the wet road. A light van risked spinning out at such speeds. The dog tensed, its ears perking up. A second later, Jack understood why. The sound of another engine approached from behind. In the mirror, headlights of another van appeared. "Damn," he muttered through clenched teeth. "Looks like they're serious about getting you back." Ahead, orange cones and detour signs appeared. Jack had only seconds to decide. Take the detour where they could easily block him on the narrower road, or risk the main highway, hoping the landslide warning was exaggerated. Suddenly, the dog barked, short and sharp, looking straight at the detour road. "What is it, friend? Ambush there?" Jack trusted service dogs since his army days. "All right, we're sticking to the main road then." He hit the brakes just as the first van tried to force him toward the guardrail. 40 tons of cargo played their role. The lighter vehicle swerved onto the shoulder, trying to avoid collision. The first van spun out and was thrown onto the shoulder, its headlights whirling crazily in the darkness. The second one braked hard, avoiding a collision. Jack didn't wait to see what would happen next. His Peterbilt pushed steadily forward through the rain, sending fountains of water from under its wheels. "Breaker, breaker. This is Long Jack at mile 147. He grabbed the CB mic. "Anybody copy? Got a tail of 2 vans. Looks like kidnappers. Over." A few seconds of silence. Then the speaker came alive. "This is Pretty Boy Al. I'm 5 miles ahead of you, Jack. What's going on?" "Al, is there really a landslide ahead?" "Negative. Just passed through. Road's clear, but there's a police patrol at the gas station a mile ahead of me. The dog's ears perked up at the mention of police, and it whined softly. Quiet, friend. Jack reached out and carefully placed his hand on the dog's neck. Something tells me we can't trust all cops right now. He remembered his recent runs. Rumors about missing dogs had been circulating for months, but the police seemed in no hurry to investigate. Too much of no hurry. Jack, they're catching up again. Al's voice brought him back to reality. And this time, hell, that's a patrol car with them. The dog growled, confirming the worst suspicions. Copy that, Al. Time for Plan B. Jack pressed a button on the panel, activating the truck's cameras. Tell your people to record everything they see. And dial 855-2-HELP-K9. What's that number? U.S. Army K9 Unit Hotline. I'm not sure, but I think my passenger is one of theirs. The headlights in the mirror grew brighter. Now they were being chased by 3 vehicles. Jack, Al's voice turned serious. 2 miles ahead is the river bridge. Construction's almost finished, but it's not officially open yet. I passed it half an hour ago. Barriers are down. You can get through. Jack looked at the dog. It was watching him with an almost human intelligence. Well, friend, shall we risk it? The rain had turned into a real downpour. The wipers could barely keep up with the water on the windshield. Ahead, in the headlights, detour signs and bright orange warning boards appeared. Bridge closed for reconstruction. Al, you sure about this bridge? Jack squeezed the mic. Affirmative, Jack. Deck's completely ready, just no guardrails installed. Builders waiting for some commission. Breaker, breaker! A new voice broke into the radio. Trucker in the blue Peterbilt. This is Nebraska State Highway Patrol. We demand you stop immediately. Jack turned off the radio. By his calculations, help from the K9 unit hotline was at least 30 minutes away. All right, buddy. He glanced at the dog. I don't know your story, but you're clearly a big problem for someone. Hold on. The dog, as if understanding, pressed low in the seat and tensed. One turn, then another, and the bridge appeared before them. The massive structure hung over the river, disappearing into darkness and rain. There really were no guardrails, just temporary barriers with cones. Jack gripped the wheel tighter. 40 tons of cargo. Wet, fresh concrete. No guardrails. One wrong move, and they'd end up in the river. All drivers. He turned on the radio one last time. South entrance to the bridge near Plattsmouth. Need footage of what's happening. And call the feds. The vans were closing in from both sides, trying to box in the truck. The patrol car behind them turned on its siren. Now or never. Jack pressed the gas. The Peterbilt shot onto the bridge, scattering cones. The engine roared, fighting against the incline. Rain spray turned everything around into a blurred haze. Suddenly, the dog barked, sharp and alarming. Jack instinctively turned the wheel, and at that moment, one of the vans tried to cut them off. But on the wet concrete, it lost traction. The next few seconds stretched into eternity. The van skidded, hit the temporary barrier, and began to roll. The second van braked hard, going into a spin. The patrol car fell back. But the Peterbilt, guided by Jack's experienced hand, continued its path across the bridge, swaying but holding course. When they finally cleared the far shore, Jack noticed headlights ahead. Lots of headlights. And flashing blue lights. All units. A clear voice came over the CB. This is Special Agent Thompson, K9 Bureau. Truck on the bridge. Continue forward. Repeat. Continue forward. We will provide cover. Sir, you can cut the engine. A tall man in a black jacket with K9 unit written on it approached the cabin. You're safe. Jack slowly turned off the ignition. The rain had finally stopped, and in the light of numerous headlights, he could see about a dozen federal agents and several armored SUVs. "Blair, you're alive, you old rascal!" The man in the jacket suddenly broke into a smile, looking at the dog. The dog barked in response and wagged its tail happily. For the first time since they'd met. "Blair?" Jack asked, opening the cabin door. "Sergeant Blair," the agent corrected. "One of our best search and rescue dogs from the special unit. He disappeared 3 months ago during an operation in Colorado. We suspected kidnapping, but had no proof." The dog smoothly jumped down and ran to the agent, but then returned and sat at Jack's feet, as if unable to decide whom to favor. "Can you tell me what happened?" Jack asked, watching federal agents detaining people from the vans on the other end of the bridge. Agent Thompson sighed. "It's a long story, but the short version, we've been investigating the theft of service dogs for 6 months. Someone started buying retired police and military dogs for underground fights. Then, they moved on to kidnapping. And local police were in on it? It wasn't a question. Some officers. They helped cover up the crimes and warned the gang about raids. But now, thanks to you and the camera footage from other drivers, we have all the evidence." Jack crouched beside Blair and scratched behind his ear. "So what happens to the sergeant now?" "Technically, he's still on duty," Thompson smiled. "But after such stress, he's due for leave and rehabilitation. Usually, we send dogs to a special center, but..." He fell silent, watching as Blair pressed against Jack's leg. "You know," the agent continued after a pause, "sometimes the best rehabilitation is trust and care. And it seems he's already chosen his new partner. Of course, if you're interested." End. 6 months later. "Cargo received, Mr. Miller. Everything's in order." The warehouse worker made the final signature on the manifest. "And this must be that famous dog from the news." Jack smiled, watching Blair sitting proudly in the cabin, observing the unloading. "That's him, my partner now." A lot had changed since that night chase. The investigation uncovered an entire network of service dog thieves involving several corrupt police officers across 3 states. The feds busted 5 underground dog fighting arenas and rescued more than 20 kidnapped animals. Jack hadn't planned on getting a dog. A trucker's life isn't really suited for it. But Blair proved to be the perfect companion. After special training and approval from the canine service, the dog officially became his partner on the road. "You know, buddy," Jack said, climbing back into the cabin after unloading, "I hear there's a new diner opened in Salt Lake City. Want to check it out?" Blair barked in response and rested his head on Jack's knee. He already knew. This meant beef pies from Mary, the elderly waitress who always kept a special portion for him. Jack started the engine, and the Peterbilt smoothly pulled away. The side doors now proudly displayed a new inscription: "Jack and Blair, the road under control." The CB radio came alive. "Hey Jack, how's your furry partner doing?" "All good, Al. A service dog is always a service dog. Only now, he's guarding cargo and his driver." Blair, hearing the familiar voice, barked into the mic, causing laughter over the airwaves. "By the way," Al continued, "you know they're calling you highway legends now. They say if there's trouble around, look for the blue Peterbilt with a black dog in the cabin." Jack smiled and scratched Blair behind the ear. A long road lay ahead, but now he knew, whatever happened on the road, he had a faithful friend ready to help by his side. The Peterbilt picked up speed, heading west. The sun was slowly setting on the horizon, painting the sky in golden colors. Somewhere out there, new adventures awaited. but that's an entirely different story.